Chris Skidmore, welcome back to the How Humans Work podcast.
Thank you, Jef. It's great to be back.
It's terrific to have you back. I have a bunch of energy and a bunch of excitement about today's conversation that will include astrology, archetypes, myth, and this theme of social cohesion. My hope is that we can use the eyes that come with astrology, that come with archetypes, and that we can see our social condition through those eyes rather than just social norms, right? Which, somebody's in or outside a social norm. And if we just, I think if we just look at the world through social norms, it's a very limited way of seeing what's going on, right? It doesn't see the underground organization. And one of the things I love about the language of astrology is its capacity to open up a sense of what are the different forces and archetypes and energies as they're known through, the Greek gods and goddesses. So when I was doing this season, even though I just saw you last season, I'm like, I really want to talk with Chris around what astrology can do to help us imagine our social situation, imagine our social condition. So that's my hope for today.
Yeah, I love it. And it's such a fascinating thing, astrology. It's like it came back into the consciousness through the 1950s, really. I mean, it had disappeared from the consciousness for quite a few hundred years, even though it was central in the ancient world. And the way that it came back was through these newspaper columns, through horoscopes, through reading what your daily thing was. And so it came back in a very shallow form, we could say, but then what's been beautiful in my own lifetime, in your lifetime, and in these pioneers that have come through in the 20th century and gifted us a deeper understanding is that it really is a frame of an underpinning frame of reality with an archetypal language that has all these checks and balances and as we will get into, like, it is a medicine wheel, but it's an ancient medicine wheel. We don't know really where we've inherited it from. Even it's so deep in our collective unconscious, I believe. And so I want to give it the reverence that you're giving it here to maintain that reverence towards this mysterious wheel that we've been given. And the more that you go around it, every time I go around it, and this is after 20 years of being engaged with astrology, I'll always learn something new. And so the beauty of this conversation is it's not about you and I telling people things. It's about us exploring and getting curious of that wheel that we've been given, and sort of humbly bowing to that incredible thing, that incredible kind of like framework that has so much openness to it and so much exploration inside of it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. So let's go towards the wheel then. And the way I would walk towards the wheel, it's just say, from the exposure to Native American traditions living in Northern California and North America, and also being a student of Chinese medicine and seeing principles like directions and in stages and phases of life, and balances of opposites and yin and yang and harmony and imbalances. That is my own journey, I would say, in the past 5 years of deepening my connection to astrology. What I find is a very detailed, elaborate conversation of forces that's available to think about. So let's start with the wheel and just, talk about the 12 houses, I would suppose. Yeah?
Well, the 12 houses are interesting to get into just because I'm embedded in those right now, because I'm going on this journey on the podcast where I'm up to the fifth. I'm basically following the sun around the zodiac, but going through each house. So when we're in Leo season, which is now, I'm in the fifth house, and then Virgo season's next, I'll be in the sixth. And that's the corresponding numbers that go along with the wheel of the zodiac is the wheel of the houses. So yeah, those are.
It's also the cycle of nature then. So each house is a station in the annular cycle of the dance of planet Earth,
Yes,
essentially.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it is tracking the rotation of the Earth and the Earth's orbit of the sun, and then all the other planets' orbits of the sun as well. And it does embed us in nature, which is something that can be forgotten about astrology because it seems kind of like a little bit, it can seem a bit disconnected. It can seem like it's a little bit upper worldy, a little bit heady. And yet it is by its nature the exploration of nature. It's not going outside of nature to discover nature. It's very much in the wheel of how we're going around, how the rotations are happening of the Earth and how the Earth itself is orbiting the sun, which is the seasons. And each season can be broken down into those three parts of the season, the start, the middle, and the end. And all of that is really embedded in the astrological system. It's just that it can be a little abstract for those looking at it. It can not seem that way, but it certainly is that way.
So let's break down some of the things that might seem abstract that could help people get a picture that the medicine of imagery and symbol and relationship to nature exist in the story of the 12 houses.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I would say as someone who's newer to the astrological world is it is counterclockwise. The houses run in a counterclockwise direction, which is, and maybe you can help understand this. And yet all the planets are moving clockwise and the sun are moving clockwise. So what is this relationship between the counterclockwise motion of counting the houses, of going backwards essentially, and the forward clockwise movement of the planets?
Yeah, well, part of that is the sort of the technicalities of it is the rotation of the Earth, which is how all the angles and the houses are formed. And so as that rotation goes around and the sky changes accordingly, it does go that way. It goes like counterclockwise, which is almost counterintuitive in a sense. It's hard to sort of describe, but in a way, with the houses, the journey begins not by jumping up and going into the world, actually, but by going down. The first move is the descent. And really those first 6 houses are the very, very personal sort of wrestling match that we have with our identity, our possessions and things, our siblings and our early childhood environment, our family. There's this moment where we come into the idea of like there's an individual here as well. I'm not just connected to all of the everything around me, and then like a sort of sifting and sorting of all of these elements before I come up into the world, before I've actually entered the world. So I think on an intuitive level, there's that sense of like, yeah, when you're born, you're definitely not ready for the world, right? When you're born, if we just take it from that moment, you're not just like flung. We're not Hermes and we're flung into the world as soon as we're born, right? In the human condition, where we're sent down in a way. We're sent down into the earthly realms, and we have to contend with everybody around us, and we're very much powerless in those early days, and we're influenced by all of the different things. We're in the mulch before eventually when we get to the 7th, we come up and out into the world, and that's our entrance point into the world. So I feel like that's the process in a way, that because we're always looking for good reflections of the human condition, and I think that's what astrology is ultimately giving us, and the houses are also speaking to that the first move in life is not up and out, check me out, here I am, I'm ready. Actually, we're not ready. And it takes a long time for us to be ready. And there's cycles within cycles of that as well.
Yeah, let's pause there, because I think visually what I'm seeing is the horizon line, and you have the first 6 houses are everything that are basically in the sky that we don't see.
Yeah.
You know, from horizon to horizon, everything that's below us. And it's not just below us underground, but it's below us on the other side of the solar system or the other side of the Earth, right? And so that those first 6 houses, and so one of the ways of looking at the wheel is the above and the below, right? What's underneath, what's invisible, and then what is visible. And the motion and the progress is what I hear you saying, is those first 6 houses are part of the developmental journey of becoming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then and all the influences we pick up along the way, and all the ideas we get along the way. Um, and then yeah, there's the above, there's the day world, the night world, but then there's a third thing as well, which is the liminal world. So the houses that are on the cusp of the horizon, 12th, 1st, and 6th, 7th, are liminal in that they're twilight, we could say. So we've got day
Or
world, night world, and twilight
or
world.
golden hour? Would you do golden hour
Golden
too?
hour. Yeah, golden
Yeah.
hour, where it's like unsure. Like, we don't go from day, 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 night, 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 day, right? There's
Yeah.
transitional periods, and
Yeah.
that's also represented inside of the wheel, where some of these houses are very much in the transition and in the twilight.
And is there extra meaning in those houses, or the meaning in this? What's usually the word is significations,
Mm.
right? But related to being on the liminal edges of the horizon that come along with that, right?
Yeah, like, I was working with a client the other day, and he was talking about this struggle that he has when he comes home from work. He's a doctor, he's a pediatrician, so he's working with kids in critical condition all day, right? And he comes home, and his partner's there, and she's been kind of like talking about all of her things, and he gets it like a big splash in the face kind of thing, that he goes straight from his day world straight into his other world. And we looked at his chart, and so much of his chart is like 12th, 1st, 6th, all these liminal houses. I was like, well, how are you transitioning? And he hadn't really contemplated that, but his house was pointing us to, his chart was pointing us towards the importance of twilight and transition, and how is he setting that up, that transition, and because then if he's not going according to his nature, he may just be walking into like, and then he goes into a sort of freeze state because he hasn't prepared
Yeah.
himself for a transition.
Yeah.
Because he can do night world and he can do day world, but he needs to be able to work transitions. So that's a conversation he has to have with his partner, which is also one of the liminal houses. The other is the 7th house, which is a liminal house. It's like when we
Yeah.
meet that other, we're in a transitional period between our lower world and our upper world, and that's the magic of relationship in a way.
Coming up the sixth house, rising up into the seventh house.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is in the west, essentially,
it's in the west.
which is
Yeah,
where the sun's coming down.
yeah, the
The
other
sun's coming
side.
down, we're coming up, right? So there's this
Yeah.
kind of inner outer wheel there.
Mm,
And I'm thinking about the first to 12th first on the other side. But first, I want to just appreciate for people, a lot of people don't believe in astrology, or they think it's a belief based thing. And I don't,
mm,
or a predictive based thing. And
mm,
that doesn't work for me either. What
mm,
works for me is it's like a language. I was thinking about it earlier today driving in. It's like, um, do you believe in Spanish or not believe in Spanish? Like, no. Do you believe in English? No. It's a language at which to explore what reality is, right? And it's not whether I believe it or not. It's just a language to talk about things. And so what I love there is the way you were able to show through your client the way in which his placements of his planets, where they are located, can have meaning and can offer language and ideas to track and maybe see that, okay, some people would say, oh yeah, it's connected to his fate, right? It's the
mm,
fate of his incarnation. This is his challenge. Other people don't have challenge with transitions. They go, oh wow, this is weird. How can the astrological chart validate an experience without ever even thinking about it, right? That's kind of
mm.
fascinating, right? So I'm just putting that out for listeners just to build that sense of a way to relate with astrology that can be effective and get out of the either or belief, not belief dynamic.
It's so important to establish that, and I love that. Do you believe in Spanish is a really good way to illustrate that. Like the absurdity of it, to believe in astrology once you've been in it long enough and steeped yourself in it and learning astrology is like that. You got to learn, the nouns and the verbs and the adjectives and the adverbs, and then you have to build that into actual, like grammar and how to say things even, and then eventually fluency comes, and so people that say something like I don't believe in astrology have said, I don't want to learn the language. Like that's what they've said. I don't want to learn the language, but I'm happy to speak about the language as though it's not real. So that's to me what that's saying. I'm happy to say my opinion on the language, having never explored it and never entered it, which as an astrologer is like, it's kind of an offensive stance, actually. It's kind of offensive to not
I could feel that in you. I
walk
could feel that
around,
in you.
to not enter. Like if you read like a Richard Dawkins article written about 15 years ago, just slashing through astrology, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, but even in his languaging within the article, it's clear that he doesn't have any, even the most basic level of astrological understanding, in which case he hasn't learnt the language and he's just said, oh, Spanish is a rubbish thing that people shouldn't speak because it doesn't describe reality in the way that English does. And English is the only way that people should talk about reality.
Yeah. Yeah. It's ridiculous, put it in that frame. It's ridiculous. And it is kind of an epidemic really of intellectual weakness or loss of perspective to not understand an issue and yet expound on it as if you understand or criticize it, right? It's a very easy thing to do, and it's happening a lot politically in America right now.
Yeah.
It's just very convenient, and it's a scarcity of energy dynamic at an evolutionary, to bring in Dawkins here, at the foundation of the energy resource that it's, and Noah Yuval Harari says this a lot, that really thinking things through is expensive.
Yeah.
It costs a lot. Right?
It does.
It takes time, right? And to have real ideas, but to just give us a viable story or something that feels good, that's easy. That can happen all the time. That's most of podcasting. That's most of social media, right? Just easy stories that that's there. But
that's
let's
why
go
I have
back.
understanding. Just to finish that off, this is why I have understanding of why you wouldn't want to spend that energy on something that you immediately believe is false. That you wouldn't want to spend that energy going in and finding out about it. So I can have understanding about it. I know that it just means to me you haven't been bitten by the astrology bug. If you have been bitten by it, you can't really get enough. You'll spend the rest of your life in it.
Well, I tell you what, when I was going to Chinese medical school, and my new housemate in Santa Cruz, he looked at my chart and he said, Moon and Mars conjunct in the 6th house, do you feel like this? I'm like, how could you see me? He didn't know me. I was like interviewing to stay at the house, and I'm like, how could you know that about me?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's where it first started for me. Okay, so I want to go to the upper world though. And so we started with one of the ways of looking at the medicine wheel is the personal below, which, is part of what's come to my mind. I was like, oh yeah, you really need society. Even though it's a personal journey, the social structures to support those first 6 houses are so fundamental. So fundamental. And it brings me back to one of my favorite things about evolution is that human villages and societies were required once a mother, early hominid, could not forage for herself and her baby alone. That the brain calories needed wasn't possible for an individual like a chimp would do for her and her offspring. So once our brain sizes got big, we needed society in our developmental growth, in our capacity. Like that was the beginning, that right there. So I want to go to the, I'm making a little connection between the upper and below world evolution, one of my favorite subjects, but let's go to the upper 6 houses and give me an overview of them.
So the way, in a sense, if we're following the house system into the upper world is we move into the 6th house is really interesting as a pivotal point in this. The 6th house relates to, really the god that you just mentioned, the 6th actually, which was interesting with your Moon Mars conjunction in there. So and it is about health and about well-being, and Mars has its joy in the 6th, so it's really interesting to bring those in. But the 6th is really where we sift and sort between the first 5 experiences that we've had in those first houses, and we get a sense of the I am at a contained level, and the 7th breaks the container. And archetypally, this is the movement between Artemis and Aphrodite. Artemis wants us to be fully contained. She's a virgin goddess. She doesn't want to engage in the relational world. And Aphrodite insists that we engage in the relational world, however hard and full of disappointment and tragedy and heartbreak and joy and love that actually is. Artemis is trying to protect us from that. Aphrodite is insisting that we come that way. And that's the transition over that. This is this place that I've spent a lot of time just staring at, of that descendant, the western horizon where the sun sets, and our movement in the house system over that edge, which is one of the great thresholds of self-containment into connection with an other. And that connection to an other is one of the access points. That could mean literally a relationship, but it can also mean like business partners and people that we want to collaborate with and make things happen with. But we have to first come out and meet that other and start to create in the world. And part of us wants to not move over that threshold and come back to the sixth, where you can be fully self-contained, but we know that there's sort of the access point to the world up there in the day world. We got to move through this place in order to get up there, in a sense. So it's a as we said, the liminal. It's a liminal place, the sixth to the seventh. It has a threshold there and has threshold guardians, which means that the dragon is there telling us to back up, to go back. It's not safe here. And then another force is also pulling us into that house and into the day world. So this is a very liminal experience here, and it's not linear, so we can sort of go forward and back here. We can go have those experiences and then drop back to the container again. But somewhere along the line, that contained self does sort of get broken in a way, so that we can have more capacity for something larger than ourselves. So we've gone through the first 6 houses, but that's really it is so personal. But as you said, it's like also societal. So it's just our little units version of society that we've learned, and now we're going to learn a few other things, something beyond ourselves. And only the seventh can really take us there, in a sense.
Yeah. And it begins the arc of the world that is seen, the sky that we do know, the things that are familiar to us. In a way, we could say the things that are obvious and shown in terms of who people are in their public standing, in their social and their communal standing. And again, it's a second kind of developmental progression. I think that's fair to say, right? Like, right? Because in a way, the beginning of forming that first attachment or that first bond or that first step towards working with another person, house of marriage. So marrying a business partner in terms of a passion or anything that's, collaborative, that's the first step. And it's we can also see that as a developmental arc too, right? The second 6.
We sign a contract there. It's Libra's house. We're signing a contract with the other one way or another, which marriage is, or a business partnership is, or our, maybe a deeper, more soulful level is we sign a contract with our longing of who we would really want to be. So we come in contact with actually it's not enough. I need to grow this self of mine. I need to grow myself out into the world. And if I don't do that, I'm going to be very disappointed in my life. So I must take the risk of crossing the threshold, even though it's evidently not safe. It's evidently and clearly not safe on some levels. I must take that risk. So we leave behind the safety of a 6th house, which contains everything so beautifully. And there's not, what astrology doesn't do is say well, that's bad, and then you got to move to this good thing. It says that's an archetypal reality, and here's another one, which I love, which is why I love Artemis and Aphrodite as a pairing of archetypes, because Artemis is saying contain yourself, and Aphrodite is saying forget that, open yourself. And they're both true. It's not as though being open is better and being closed is worse, or any combination of those. It's about, that archetypal reality is in conflict with this archetypal reality. And so now as humans, we must stand at that crossroads and make a few decisions. That's what the 7th house is asking us to do, make a few decisions.
Yeah, I kind of feel there's personal lines going on there. But and it's also to say, and another thing is it's a progression, right? So 6 to 7, because this is where we're hanging out right now. It's a progression, but it's also a regression. You're saying you can go back into a contained reality. And so this idea that it has to go one direction is not very useful completely. It's a flexibility of energies that one can recognize and work for or work against in different moments in different contexts or situations.
Totally. And so if you take that from sort of like a somatic point of view, it's like, Peter Levine talks about titration, taking in a little bit of that, bringing it in and working that through, taking in a little bit of that and bringing it in and working it through. So it's definitely not a case of just like charge through these houses. That's not what we're looking to do. Actually, in the circular nature of reality, we go through again and again. We're moving through again and again. We're going around this circle again and again. And
sometimes back and forth and sometimes across.
Yeah.
Right?
And sometimes we do charge through and then get to the end of all that and go like, what was that about? And sort of, and maybe have to go back a few steps to be like, what does this all mean? And
yeah,
we can get torn apart by all of that. There's lots of ways that this can play out. It's a mapping in a way.
It is a mapping.
Yeah.
And what I want to point out to listeners, one of the reasons I'm attracted to myth and one of the reasons I love the astrological frame is because of what you just did with the connecting the Peter Levine practice of titrating, right? And these therapeutic models and these neuroscience models, and they get really precise, they get really clean, but they get sterile sometimes for me at the same time. And so it's good. Okay, you need a clean. If you're doing surgery, you want a clean room, right? Like you do, but also the vitality of the imagery and of the archetypal energies is so helpful because it's easier to see a bit of Artemis and a friend and a bit of Aphrodite and a friend than it is to see titrating, or talk to them about, oh, you need to titrate. It's just like, it's just the story and the relatedness and the richness and the body of it just feels good. So thank you for that. And I want to make a move here because I think it's important as we're looking at the wheel. One of the next things I wanted to point out is that there's you could break the wheel down in 3 parts of 4. Right. So the first 4 houses are what I tell people is I look at it as an initiation. Right. The first 4 houses are about the arrival of those element energies. Earth, air, water, fire. Actually, not in that order, but fire,
earth, air,
water, air, water. Yeah. And then the second 4 are about the transitions or the thresholds or the initiations of the difficulties of that domains. And the last 4 are completions, are integrations, are where they become in their fullness, right? So we could take any of the elements. Maybe we'll do the fire, right? So the first fire, Aries, first house, it's about the becoming self. I'm here, I'm an I. And the second is like, I'm an I, but I'm on stage. I'm showing I'm beginning to show my I outwards and be there in a kind of way. And then the Sagittarian fire, the 9th house has that I am this greater fire of the Godhead, and I'm connected to these great ideas. My eye is with that, right? So can see each of those and take each of those elements. So how do you break down the group of 4s? And you can wax on what I offered, but I'd love to hear how you look at the progression of the houses.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important just to take one step back and say that the houses and the signs of the zodiac move positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, which means that it goes outward, inward, outward, inward, outward, inward. So you can go around the circle that way and see Aries positive, Taurus negative, Gemini positive, Cancer negative, and you can go around that way just to feel what it's like to be, which just means maybe better words are like extrovert, introvert, extrovert, introvert, or outward, inward, outward, inward. It's definitely not good, bad. And then we can tack on the modes, which I'm actually not going to get into now because I don't want to cause confusion with that. But then the elements, so it does go fire, then earth, then air, then water, then fire, then earth, then air, then water. So just to get a sense, like this is the medicine where we're talking about. So there's the yin yang of positive and negative, and then there's the four elements. And then of course in the middle is the quintessence, the fifth element, which is kind of this hidden component of astrology that maybe lands in the center of it all. That is some fifth component that you can sense the more that you go into it, that is in everything. So then to answer your question, the first four, the way I work with it personally is that those are very, very personal. Those first four houses, which I would say is an initiation. It gets the story going, but it's so deeply felt as personal. Like there's no real distinction in those houses between what is what and who is who in a sense, right? Like we're just getting born into this situation that we're in, and it's so deeply felt in the cells, those first four houses. And when we move into the next four, we move into the interpersonal of the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth of, then we start to interact with this other. And then when we move into the last four, we're really in the transpersonal. We move into the world, really out into the world, and we try to interact with hopefully a integrated enough personal and interpersonal so that we can speak into the transpersonal. And that's kind of the progression of the three. And as you say, we can go through the fire houses, through the earth houses, through the air houses, through the water houses, and each one pick up a progression and a regression. So we go forward and back throughout that. And in a sense, we're entering territory where already we need time to contemplate the rich complexity of all of that. I feel, like we kind of need to sit inside of that and to feel our way around that circle and back and go forward and back and across and all these different ways that we can. And that's learning astrology in the same way that you mentioned the language. It's about embedding yourself. Like the best way to learn language, right, is to go to the place where people speak that language and humbly offer yourself to that and to hear it and to start to pick it up and to, it's the same with astrology. If you can hear this and move around the circle of the houses and the circle of the zodiac, then you can start to experiment from within it and feel how you can go forwards and backwards or across at any point from any of the houses.
Okay. I think we did the good, grammar introduction to the houses, kind of a little bit of the organization and how they can be worked with. And I think we should go now specifically into this idea of society and self. And we both had the same thought about talking about the fifth and the 11th houses.
Mm.
Yeah. You ready for that?
So, yeah. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Good.
Definitely.
Good.
Yeah. And I will say that that's kind of like part of the nature of astrology is you can zoom out and zoom in. And that's why I really love it as a model of reality. The ability to zoom out and get a sense of the whole picture, which is in some ways impossible to see the whole picture, but it does give us like a reflection from the stars. And then to zoom in and like we're about to do, to move into specifics about the relationship between the individual and society, the self and the group, and to explore that very specific element of reality. So we get to sort of almost, just hold steady that part while we, or consider the rest of the chart. Like when I was studying economics, we used to talk about this of like holding certain things as constant, even though they're obviously not. So we hold those other houses as constant and we just focus in on the complexities of the fifth and the 11th and the things around them. Yeah, that's what it gives us the ability to do without those other houses sort of like storming into our conversation.
Great. So let's do that. Let's look at the fifth and the 11th. And where would you start in seeing how what the fifth and the 11th have to teach us, or they can offer us insight into the dynamics of self and society.
Well, maybe just to enter through the fifth of, we talked about the groupings of four. So when you've gone through the first four houses, you've gone through every element one time, right? So you've had one touch of every element. The first, second, third, and fourth, you've gone fire, earth, air, and water. And then you reach a certain threshold that I've just been exploring through the podcast, that threshold where we move away from the fourth house is sort of like the home and the family dynamics, your script and your role within family, into the fifth house, which is like your individuation and the things that you really enjoy and what makes me me, and the process that Jung called individuation. Like it begins in a sense in the fifth of I got to become an individual here. I can't just be in the tribe.
Yeah. It's like going away to college.
Going away to college, maybe it's your first love, or maybe it's your first adventure, or maybe, something that kind of like, I got to step out. And that can be a treacherous time, or it can be very much supported by the family. I mean, there's lots of ways that it can be ritualized. I mean, it probably should be ritualized, in ancient ways, and in the modern, even in the today's world, there's ways to address that as a significant rite of passage, that something is dying and being reborn in this house. And if that is acknowledged by the tribe and the village, it sets it up with well. And if it's not really set up. And we're living in a time where there's all of this ancient understanding of reality that is so kind of like evident and obvious in a sense, has been largely forgotten. And so we tend to leave on a trail of gold dust or something. We try to make our way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were looking through the eyes of the fifth house at human nature, what would those eyes say?
That you have to enjoy this experience and get to know what you love and what your pleasures are and what makes you feel good and the things that you long for and want and desire. This is what the fifth would say if it didn't have any other houses talking about any other things. It would just, like Venus, who is Aphrodite, it delights in this house. She's in her joy there. That's a really good way to understand this. And that's where your Venus is. Amazing. So she's in her joy and she loves it there. She wants to be here. And she's like, just stay here. It's great here. Don't worry about those other things, because there's, your role in society and your education and your family and all these other components of reality. And she's like, yeah, but what do you really love? And she's asking us to spend enough time here to get what we love, because that can be the fuel that's deep inside of your heart, really, that does actually produce enough energy for you to go through those other trials and tribulations and things that come up in your life.
I want to riff on an image.
Yeah.
I was just at the Golden Gate Park this past weekend for the 60th anniversary of the Grateful Dead.
Oh, amazing.
There was 60,000 people. 60,000 people were there.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was mind blown at the size of the stage. The stage was probably 100 meters wide with the visuals, with the screens, and 20, 30 meters tall. And I was like, this is good. This is Leo season.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the fifth house. We have the performers, it's just the energy. And yet I have this idea I'll bring after we talk about Hephaestus in later. But I was also like, and right below my feet is a small stage too. Right here, I'm on a small stage too, and it's so easy especially, I don't know how it rolls in Bali or Australia right now, but just like the magnitude and the volume of these guys were on these massive screens. I'm like, they're like gods up there. They're like 40 feet tall, images, and you're just like, and it's just the size perspective, and what it makes me think about when you say do what you love, like all the deadheads, I'm not a deadhead. I'm deadhead adjacent, but I
Yeah.
appreciate deadheads and I
Yeah,
appreciate
me
the
too.
dead
Me too.
culture that everybody loves them. I mean, deeply, most everybody there deeply loves what this music does for their sense of life. And yet this 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 thing, like the size of that stage, the volume of it, like and I also wish for everybody there to know what they love. Like what's their bigger stage than just being at the big stage, like that we can increase our stage of our pleasure. And I have to say, I think it's really difficult. I'm ruled by Saturn, so maybe it's difficult for me. But the pressure and the force to perform and achieve and either get some kind of recognition because it's an influencer society now, or have enough money, or scratch by, and it's really hard for that fifth house. And yet everywhere we look, there's this amazing fifth house quality of performers and stars and all this great energy, right? And it's, in a way, I would say there's an imbalance there, and I really love the soulfulness of your invitation of the fifth house of like, God, I really need to think about what I love and what brings me pleasure, not just what I'm willing to work for, or other people who are really good at something and admire, but inside me, inside my lifespan. Yeah. That's my risk.
I love that riff, and it's so poignant. And that I've only just really been introduced to the Grateful Dead by a friend of mine when I was in Greece, and she put on an album while we were driving because we did so much driving around Greece, and she put on, I don't know if it's an album, it was a performance actually, and I was like, oh man, these guys and where they take it, and they're riffing and they're going for it, right? And they're going in such cohesion. And then you get the sense of the culture of the Grateful Dead and the Deadheads and like the religious fervor inside of all of that. But I love what you're bringing. It's like you're bringing this enormous stage to our presence, like 60,000 people, like 100 meters, all of this magnitude, as you say, like gods. And do we remember in this culture that we're meant to be reflecting inwardly on that, like about our stage and about our, because there can be, how do we sort of like address that? It's like there's a performative element of this where we're trying to get to the soul of the matter. We're trying to get to just like doing what we love. And the Grateful Dead seem to be a beautiful example of that, who are doing what they love, actually. And if they stop doing what they love, things would stagnate within that field. And yet an enormous stage is formed around them, really by their followers who created that stage for them and said, do it more often, bigger, please. And they went, yeah, okay, well, we love it. So, and that's the progress of that, right? But they probably started off in basements like anyone else and just like, is this good or is this not? I don't know. Like, let's just keep doing it though, because we love it. And that's what we can forget of, like, is this good or not? We're in a society now that feeds back to us, essentially value is measured according to followers and likes, as in that world, in the world that we've been given only very, very recently in human evolution have we been given a model like that. We know that that's an unhealthy way to view things, because I don't want it to be I don't want to value my work that way. I want to value my work in terms of what it makes my heart do, and then that way that can move its way into the world. That's how I want to value it. And yeah, that could involve picking up more people along the way, like the Grateful Dead have. It may also not, and which is totally okay. And I just want to speak into that, like, let's get out of the madness, the insanity, if we can, at an individual level, to say, like, it doesn't matter if I have 10 followers or 100,000 or 1,000,000 followers. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, somehow getting the matter out of that matter.
Yeah. Don't you think in a way we're talking about 11th house expectations being forced on fifth house issues, needs?
That's exactly what we're talking about. And so which is
so
a great
help
way
everybody catch up with us. Describe that.
So then we move to the 11th. So the 11th is opposite the 5th. And the 11th is, I mean, you start into the 11th to look at its groups and teams and conglomerations and when people come together. But then ultimately it's the village itself, and then beyond the village it's the society, and then beyond the society it's the collective consciousness which is different than the collective unconscious, which would be the 12th house. The collective consciousness, almost like it can lead us into like what this thing called the masses is, or the mass psychology is. And then the individual suddenly looks over at this mass movement and has to consider, like, who am I now in the face of this thing? Who am I? Not just in doing what I love, but now doing what I love has to face up to the thing opposite. And that's within astrology. Always there's a tension point between the house and its opposite house. And that's a great way to understand the checks and balances of what occurs. Now,
So it's a dialogue, right?
It's a
It's a dialogue, and some dialogues could be oppressive. It's basically, I'm suggesting that the social networking, collective conscious, it can be oppressive to the fifth house, is the way we were talking about it, right? But it also can be other forms of dialogue where the pressure or the need for the archetypal energy that lives in the 11th house connected to society and community can ask the fifth house to get clear and come to that, bring your pleasure to the world, right?
Yeah.
That's possible as well.
So in the analogy that we're running with, you've got the fifth house will be the Grateful Dead themselves and the artists and the music they're creating and the riffs they're going on, and they're just exploring consciousness through, that's what they love to do, and they keep doing what they love. And the 11th house are the deadheads that form around them in a positive way and say, let us build more stages for you, build more, let us bring you forward. We love you and we want you to do more of your thing, right? So that's a really beautiful, positive way that can go.
Yeah.
In the negative side of it, the individual can feel so dwarfed by the magnitude of this thing out in the 11th. And also, like, are there social norms here that make me feel like I just should hide away and shouldn't be here? I shouldn't
shine.
I shouldn't shine, because what if I shine, then maybe I'll be attacked, and people are attacked for shining in this world. I mean, it's a strange world right now. It's a strange world when it comes to that. But it was always like that. It's just been amplified with the technologies we've brought forward. And so maybe you go out and you do your big shining thing, and you get instead this force coming back that either just like pushes against that and say, you suck, this is horrible, or draws you into a collective, like draws your individual self into a collective place. And that's equally, if not more, dangerous. They might say, give me more of that. Like early YouTube was such a great example. I mean, it still is, but early YouTube in particular, where people got famous for like a little glitch in there in something that they did, and people wanted more of that. Give us more of that. And then actually you're not really doing the fifth house of doing what you love. You're doing what the people want you to do. Ooh.
Great. Okay. So let's come back to this question, but through the 11th house. What does the 11th house, if we look through the eyes of the 11th house, what does it say about human nature or our social nature to us?
Well, it says we have responsibility, doesn't it? It says we have a responsibility to this bigger, greater collective thing, and we need to pay attention to that. We can't just get lost in the things that so it looks over at the fifth and says, like, you can't just get lost in the things that you really love. Like, where's that? Where's the fruit of that for us? What are you going to be doing for us? What have you done for us lately? This kind of energy.
Yeah, reminds me of the Daguerre and Malidoma Sommet, and the sense that they're the village. That your gifts need to feed the village.
Yeah, your gifts need to feed the village, and it's true. And we can't just have you like disappearing back into the fifth, into your pleasures, and not bringing the fruit of that forward. But then you can hear how that dialogue could go so many different directions. Some really beautiful and positive. Beautiful and positive. And I think that you bring in Malidoma Sommet and the way that the village and the individual are interacting. There's a size component to that, though, isn't there? There's an actual village that sees the individuals as valuable to the village. Now, once it gets out to the masses, which we're in now, and most people growing up in the Western world are not interacting with a village. They're interacting with an enormous force that can make them feel inadequate and empty and
so quickly.
I mean, it happens to us all the time, right? Like, let's just be honest about it. It happened to me yesterday, looking into this big space and going, wow, who am I in the face of all of this?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, it's thinking about the Robin Dunbar interviews I just did, and if you know Dunbar's number and social brain hypothesis and the size that we can relate to, which is basically we have a max size, and it's not mass society. Our mass
Yeah.
society is like 1,500 people. You know, we can recognize 5,000 faces, right?
Mm.
But I like this tension because I think we're in a good place to look at some of the tensions that we have in our what brings us pleasure, who we are, what fills us up, and the dance of society. And I would suggest maybe the intuitive teaching here is that once that force of the 11th house starts getting super big and super powerful, that there's going to be almost like a distortion of some level or some kind of impact at the interpersonal level in the fifth house. That's kind of how it's landing in me. Like, yeah, I think that's what is one way to track the dynamics.
Yeah. I I like where you're going there. It brings me back to what you said at the beginning, which I wrote down, and I know that's the kind of like the essence of this season of the podcast, the How Humans Work podcast is social cohesion, right? Like that's one of the things you're having a good look at.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, this is we've entered a territory that's like very dismembering. I find it very dismembering in a way when I talk into it and talk about it. It's like to just to speak to it personally of like, whew, I can feel like you said, 5,000 faces that we recognize. And I remember Margaret Atwood in a book, Oryx and Craig, talking about the 150 that we can individuate. Like we can have 150 that we can understand. Beyond that, we start to group, which is Fifth, 11th as well. It's a Fifth, 11th term or expression
Yeah,
or
right.
understanding.
Yeah.
Once we get over 150 people, we cannot individuate all those people anymore. So we have to group them together, say, oh, those people are like this. It's just the limit of the human ability.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
No, it's the
like,
limit. And that's what Robin done. 150 is Dunbar's number. So we're talking about the same
Mm,
structural dynamics here.
right. Yeah.
So I think we've kind of explored that enough.
Great.
Was there anything else you would say about the 11th, 5th that you'd like? I really want to make sure we highlight
No, I think that
this tension.
whatever else is around, we'll probably get to it through when we go mythic, which
Right.
I
Let's go.
understand
Let's
you're
go
taking as
mythic. But I will say the other thing I'm thinking about is the courage of the lion of the fifth house.
Mm,
That's a good like, oh yeah, right. So it's not just like, oh, society's too big. I'm also a lion,
yes.
you know? And one of my favorite songs is Listen to the Lion by Van Morrison. So I'm gonna turn everybody towards Listen to the Lion and hear him embrace the lion energy. So yeah, let's be honest about how hard it is, but let's also be lions. Okay, let's go mythic. That is a little mythic, but let's go mythic. And I think we should just stick with Hephaestus,
Yeah.
unless you have another thing you want to do.
No, we'll go with Festus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
Yeah. I'm so excited to talk about him. I thought the way to talk about Hephaestus before we say, who he is, because I didn't even know who he was until recently. I was looking at Stephen Fry's Mythos book, and it's great. And I'm like, why did I never hear of Hephaestus? But when you think of Hephaestus, what do you imagine?
So I'm just going to go with what strikes me as you say it, as you ask the
good.
question. And I've got him
Yeah.
falling, cast down from Olympus, which he falls for an entire day. And there's some versions where his mother, Hera, cast him out. There's some versions where his father, Zeus, cast him out. But either way, he's falling for an entire day. And then lands on the island of Lemnos, which is an island that has so many mythic components that really bring his story and his wife Aphrodite's story to life. So I think about him falling. I think about him lamed. I think about him as a response from Hera, who's the great mother. She's like the queen of the gods, if you think about it that way. She's queen goddess, wife of Zeus, who's the king. And in one version
Who's
of
also
the story,
Jupiter, who's also Zeus is Jupiter in astrology.
Zeus is Jupiter, yeah, and Hera is Juno, who's an asteroid. I think about in one version of the story that when Hera saw Athena born from Zeus's head, fully armored and born, banned, she's ready for action. She was obviously very jealous and infuriated by such a thing that a man should birth a creature without a woman, especially with her relationship to marriage and all of the social constructs that she represents. So she's a bit of an 11th house figure, and Zeus is a bit of a 5th house figure, I would say. And so as a response to that, she gives birth to Hephaestus by herself, just to say, anything you can do, I can do better.
Of course she can. Believe that for
But he
sure.
happens to be lame.
Yes, he happens to be lame in the mythos, in the Stephen Fry's version of it. That's the main reason he's rejected, is his
Yeah.
inability as an infant. So what stands out for me is the deep abandonment and the imperfection. He's supposed to be perfect because he's born from gods or a goddess, right? And he's not. He's not. He's deeply not. And the response of the perfected, or the part that has an agenda, or the goddess that has gods have agenda, is rejection. It doesn't match,
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of is that's the kind of core thing there. And then the other part is the skillfulness that I think is his later response. So I don't know if you want to get into if we should get into a little bit more of the story about how he becomes skillful, or what some of his skills are, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, he creates enormous beauty from down there in the place that he's cast off from. He's got the forge and the fire, and he's a metal worker, and he's in Latin his name is Vulcan, and this is where we get volcano from. So his places will be volcanic areas of the earth, or volcanic areas of the ancient world, because he's beating away at things down there. He's smashing all the metal and he's making all this noise. But then what he produces out of that is some of the greatest works of art, but they're also functional. So it's like chariots and swords and thunderbolts and shields and all this beautiful stuff that he makes with his metal. But it's always got a function. And I think that's a really interesting dichotomy between him and his wife Aphrodite, who is more jewelry and ornaments and things without function that are also beautiful. As for the question of how he learns to do that, I got to tell you, I don't know. How does he learn to do that, Jef?
I don't know if I know off the top of my head, so I'm not going to worry about how but I know
Okay,
he
cool.
does. I know that he does become this smith. He's like the god of smithing and the god of these things. And his productions, the thing he makes, are not necessarily all benevolent, right? He builds Prometheus' chains.
Right. Yeah.
Right. He builds the throne that traps Hera, his mom, who rejected him. Right. And sets him up. He builds his throne. Hera gets trapped. She can't. Is this what you know too? She can't get out.
Going.
So he's the only one who can get it out. That's how he, as the lame, somewhat disfigured. I don't know what it means. How disfigured you have to be disfigured and be a god. Maybe it's just a little bit. Maybe it's a lot. I kind of imagine he's somewhere like a Quasimodo Apollo.
Yeah.
Like some kind of hybrid there. He's like, see, something like that. He's got the vigor and the force and the intelligence of a god, but he's got some physical asymmetries, some serious ones.
Yeah.
And so the reason I wanted to bring, because I wasn't thinking like, oh, I want to talk about astrology. I wasn't thinking myth off the top of my head. And you said, what myth do you want to talk about? Or mythic character, god figure, goddess figure. And Hephaestus showed up for me. And there's something about his story that is like, hits me in my heart and in my gut in relationship to thinking about the difficulty of the world and the society we're in.
Yeah. Well, essentially, he's told
essentially,
he's told that you're not good enough to be a part of this, and yet he is one of the pantheon of, he's in the pantheon of gods. He's one of the 12. He's never taken out of there, but he's also considered to be not worthy, which I think just raises some of the tension between Fifth and Eleventh, and it speaks to such an essential kind of component of the human experience. Like we look out into the world, and I think many, if not all of us, have the archetypal experience of, I'm not worthy of this. Or maybe I could have been worthy if I wasn't lamed, or if I didn't sustain this wound or this injury, or if this didn't happen, or if my childhood had gone differently, or if my mum had loved me more, or if my father hadn't rejected me, or, you know, all these kind of ifs are part of the Hephaestus knowledge base or understanding of reality, you know. And he's interestingly, when he lands on Lemnos, the women there, because it is an island typically that's all women, which there's different elements of mythology, especially between Aphrodite and Hephaestus. We should bring in a bit more Aphrodite to get a sense of why I keep mentioning her. But the women take care of him, and this becomes an island sacred to him. He is raised by them, right? He's given human compassion where he doesn't get godly compassion, which I find a curious element of his story.
Yeah. There's something that brings me to the kindness of humans when you say that.
Yeah.
You know, there's something like redemptive in us. It's like we can accept the imperfections, you know?
And
Like
that's
we
why I
know
love,
we are, yeah.
I kind of love going back to the Greeks for that very reason, in the sense that the gods are very flawed and openly flawed. They're not trying to tell you how to be and how to live. And that's very healing for my own religious wound that I sustained by being raised in a religion that it's not like anything happened within that religion. I actually have a deep appreciation for it, but it just kind of like it vanished from my world. And it left me with like, what is this thing? But it did tell me about a perfect divine world. And to find the Greek world, which is a deeply imperfect, flawed divine world, was healing on just a really unconscious level. And then, as you say, it can be sometimes the humans in their fallenness from that divine place that actually are able to gift us the compassion. And which just is the word that just means with suffering, right? They're able to be with the suffering in a way that the gods maybe are not.
The place I want to go to in my invocation of Hephaestus as a kind of figure to help us think about social cohesion is his response to his pain, right? Which is to create, you know, your podcast,
Yeah.
which is so good in this season on the Soul's Turn podcast with Chris. You guys should check it out if you haven't. The fifth season is this unbridled creation, right? And he has this capacity to make things, and he makes things in a way that change conditions, change realities, right? And so I think about that metaphor, that mythic metaphor of, oh, okay, out of the woundedness is the possibility of that deep, it's kind of boring, but that homeostatic response. Not I'm just going to find balance, but I'm going to find and create a whole new layer of balance in order to adapt, right? And he does that. And I feel like inside me, when I think about America or the world or the things we're going through, and the way that the mass 11th house can feel so rejecting and feel so overwhelming, or so like, hey, I'm not important. My my little shine is just like so small here, right? That the way that can, extinguish it in a way that Hephaestus is kind of a heartening figure for me. That he does something with his condition that's so creative and powerful.
Endlessly creative as well. He gathers, he's a craftsman. And the way that as a mythic figure, he explores the wound and the not enoughness and the pain underneath all of that, and seems to just pour that into creation. As you say, sometimes what he creates are traps, and he's known for a few different cages actually, and a few different ways that he makes traps for people, because he is, like, he comes with it, but he doesn't apologize for that. He is wounded, and I think that that's the thing of like, yeah, I am wounded, and yet
Yeah.
I can create Zeus's chariot. Like, that's the kind of level of, or Helios even, his chariot, like the sun god's chariot, right? Like, so something that has the beauty, but also the strength and the functionality. And I think that's what he really, that
Yeah.
functional component to it. It just blows my mind. Like, it blows my mind when people can, the things that that the humans can create blows my mind, you know?
Yeah, I want to get to that to close up, but famous creations according to the web: Achilles' armor, Hermes' wings and helmet,
Hmm.
the shield of Heracles, Pandora.
Oh,
It's what the web says. I didn't have time. Automatons, self-moving statues or helpers made of gold, precursors to robots in mythology.
huh.
The chains of Prometheus, palaces of the Olympian gods, right?
And I'll add to that one because he also made the helmet of invisibility for Hades. Pretty
Right.
certain that that was one of his creations.
Yeah, no,
too.
I think I heard, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And the way that Stephen Fry articulates it in his writing in his rendition of the Greeks is that Hephaestus didn't really harbor a lot of resentment. He got revenge only in order to establish, he did these things that were more difficult only to establish his value and his capacity to create. And he wasn't like vindictive in a sense,
Yeah.
as that's the way he presents it. So I have a lot of love for Hephaestus. I really do. And I think he's a potential symbol model that each of us, if we feel called to kind of explore, like what do we do with this 11th house, 5th house dynamic? Yeah.
Mm. And I think it's relevant to today's world because we're given so many images of perfection and beauty and like well curated things out in the world, right? Which is also part of it. We look out into the world and we see everything's beautiful and we're given that, but we know that everything's clearly not. And so it creates this dissonance. Whereas Hephaestus lives within that tensional point between the deformed and the
Yeah.
beautiful.
Which is, we haven't, and I don't know that we'll have time today to talk about his shadow and his relationship with pleasure and shame.
Yeah.
Do you think you could get that?
Well, the shame comes down a lot, because I mean, of course, he's cast down by maybe his mother, maybe his father. He's cast down to earth. He's told to get out of here. He is ashamed of who he is. His wife is Aphrodite. So then there's this beautiful sort of it's like the Greeks had a great sense of humor, I think. And so, of course, they marry Hephaestus to Aphrodite, who's the goddess of beauty and pleasure. I mean, Aphrodite's love life is about like your Adonis and your Ares and all of the most beautiful
Apollo,
things, right? Her son
Ares,
is like
and,
Eros, and like
Right.
it's always the most beautiful, and yet she's married to Hephaestus. As almost like there's this comic component to that, which I just enjoy the comedy of that in itself. But of course, Aphrodite was never interested in being in that marriage, so immediately starts to have an affair with Ares, who's Mars. So this is like Venus and Mars getting together. And Hephaestus wants to bring the shame to them, to make them feel shame and experience the shame that they should feel, according to Hephaestus, with this love affair that's going on. That's a shameful act. They should
Is
feel
that 11th house judgment on 5th house?
Definitely. It's
Yeah, okay,
casting
great.
aspersions.
It's
And of course,
amazing.
he's in it. This is his wife here as well, right?
Yeah,
Like,
of
so
course.
yes, he wants
Yeah.
to bring the shame.
Yeah.
And he brings the shame in the form of making a tiny little cage in which and then tricks Aphrodite and Ares into, convincing them he's going to be away for a few days. He's off, he's got some business. I think he was heading to Lemnos. And then as soon as he's gone down the road, Ares is like straight in there. And then in bed, the cage comes up and catches them, and now they're hanging from the ceiling naked and entangled in each other. And then Hephaestus calls all the gods. He doesn't call the goddesses. He just wants all the gods to see this shameful thing, this shameful act. And we can sort of imagine all of the gods going like, whoa, this is intense. Like feeling the 11th house shamefulness of what's happened here. And then when Hermes comes in, he sees the situation and he makes kind of the perfect joke, the perfect irreverent joke at the perfectly wrong, perfectly right time. And he says something like, wow, I'd triple those chains and be there for 1,000 years if it meant that I got to be with my sister Aphrodite. If I got to be entangled with her naked. And everybody has a good giggle and the shame is gone. So his whole plot falls apart because of the laughter that Hermes brings, because you can't have shame and laughter in the same place. It's like the titillating force of laughter.
Yeah.
It was a cure, in a sense, for all of that shame. And I love that little snippet. It's in the Odyssey. It's like just this little snippet that was obviously a popular story. It was sung by a bard in the Odyssey, you know, sung by someone who's just like singing along. He has a little story to tell, and everybody has a little chuckle when they hear the bard sing that story. And I think for me, there's the healing is in that story, is in that that irreverence at the right time, because that shame, some elements of that shame, it just can't be titrated, I don't think. You know, like it can't be back to the titration component. It can't be integrated. And I think we need something else that can move through something like shame. It's not the kind of emotion that can be integrated, like grief, loss, pain, all suffering. A lot of those things can be, but shame can end up like we are in that cage.
Yeah, it's like a spell. Yeah, it's true. I see that. Well,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
spell.
And that's profound, because I really like closing up the show that way, where we're not just talking about the pleasure dynamic, but the shame, and that somehow feels like for us to be in society and work with ourself and our creative self, our wounded self, that we have to both find our pleasure but know how to deal with shame. And basically saying that quick-witted humor is one of the ways out of that, right? Broader perspective.
Yes.
So it's a really
Yeah.
beautiful teaching story.
Yeah, I love it. And you get little snippets like that in Greek mythology where they use all of these, the formula that they have with all of these different gods, and then they put it all together in this one scene as a little teaching moment. Because, yeah, I mean, the 11th house wants us to be better in society, and it can use shame in order to do that from time to time.
Yeah, you think about all the comment sections, all the hating,
Oh my
you
God,
know,
yeah.
right? Yep, yep. All the trolling. Yep, for sure.
And so many of us carry that around because a lot of us, and maybe all humans, are sensitive creatures that take a lot of that in and then carry it around. And that can be our lameness on the soul level. You know, we can be reminded of that early wound. And sometimes we have to take a hermetic approach to these things, just to wake us up and have us keep moving in the direction of our pleasure again, actually. You know, and what's Hermes' joke? He's like, I'd want to lie with pleasure, even if it is in a cage. Put 3 times the amount of cage on me.
Definitely. Which is basically shameless.
It's shameless. I mean, that's
It's
Hermes' thing.
shameless. It's
Yeah.
being shameless about one's calling towards pleasure. That's beautiful. And I think that's an
Mm,
important teaching. I really do.
yeah. Feels like a good place to
Yeah, we
wind,
did
doesn't
it.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. Chris Skidmore, thank you so much for being back on the show and being an important part of this season. Really appreciate talking with you.
Thank you, Jef. It's a pleasure.